Are you still patching the past? Old man. The flag rope clicked against its pole outside, the sound sharp in the morning air. He didn't answer, just adjusted the bolt beneath the bleachers, the mop handle steady in his hand, sunlight glinting off the faded service patch stitched to his jacket. For a heartbeat, the gym went quiet. Dust floated like proof waiting for light. Even the inspector's pen paused midair, caught between rule and respect. Still quiet men leave echoes too, ones you don't hear until the whistle blows. The air inside the gym smelled faintly of varnish and old leather, the kind of scent that belonged to floors polished by habit, not schedule. Morning light pushed through the high windows, cutting into the chill, and finding the man who kept it that way. Eli Harlan moved along the bleachers with a slow steadiness, a rag over his shoulder. His mop balanced like a staff of quiet authority. The service patch stitched to his jacket caught the sunlight. A faded insignia shaped like an anchor, ringed with the words U.S. Naval Maintenance Corps. The inspection team arrived at 8 sharp. At its center was Mason Keir, the new city inspector, young enough to treat experience as clutter. A clipboard rested on his palm like a gavel. Morning, Mason said, eyes skimming the walls. Place looks nostalgic. Eli nodded. Clean's clean, sir. The hoops still hold. Mason crouched, tapping the base of a support beam with his pen. No digital logs, no QR tracking, nothing updated since, 1978? The staff nearby smothered a chuckle. A few students carrying mats paused to listen. Guy Seed. 23 as the harmless-sounding jab that lands deeper than it should. Eli kept his tone even. Things built right don't expire, son. Mason smiled thinly. Right. Until the bolts give out and we're on the evening news. He scribbled a note, the kind that can shrink a man's paycheck to a rumor, and moved on. Jamie Cole, the young volunteer sweeping the far corner, watched Eli's expression. There wasn't much to read, just a small shift in his jaw as he crouched beside the baseboard. With practiced calm, he tightened a bolt, wiped away the streak of rust, and whispered almost to himself. 40 years still steady. The group drifted toward the exit. Someone muttered, "Guess the old guy doesn't believe in progress." Eli straightened, slow and deliberate. The light fell squarely on the patch at his shoulder, threadbare but clean. Progress, he said softly, depends on how you define standing still. Mason paused at the doorway, uncertain whether he'd been answered or dismissed. The whistle marking period change shrilled through the gym. I rest marker. Then the whistle blew. For a moment, dust hung like memory. Jamie leaned on his broom. "Sir," he called across the echo, half smiling. "What's your rank in maintenance?" The question drew a laugh from a teacher passing by. Eli's reply was a half smile that didn't reach pride. "Same one I had out there," he said, tapping the patch. "Earned by doing the job right." Mason jotted another line, pretending not to hear, but he did glance back once, curiosity edging through superiority. When the inspectors were gone, Eli gathered his tools. The gym felt quieter than before, as if the building itself waited for the next judgment. He ran a palm along the polished railing and checked the bolt again, not because anyone asked, but because that was the promise he'd made long ago. Sunlight slid across the floorboards, tracing the outline of the patch. It glinted like a modest medal no one pinned. He breathed in the empty gym, the hum of fluorescent lights mixing with the faint thud of basketballs from the next court over. Someone outside called his name, but he took one more look around before answering. The old rigging above shimmered faintly in the beam of light, unbroken, unwitnessed, and sound. Silent beat. He nodded once to the quiet. Pull quote, replay, trigger, ILT's 12 words. Things built right don't expire, son. The diner sat at the corner of Main and Fifth, a place that still smelled of coffee and bacon grease even after a decade of no-smoking laws. Neon from the open sign blinked against the window as Eli Harlan took his usual stool. His jacket hung loose on his shoulders, the service patch catching the light each time he moved his arm. The waitress poured without asking. "Refill." He nodded. "Thanks, Darlene." Steam rose from the mug, curling into the lamplight, a small silent beat that filled the gap where talk could have been. At the far end of the counter, a woman with white hair set down her newspaper. "You're Harlan, aren't you?" she asked. Eli turned polite. "Used to be. Still am, I guess." She smiled. "Clara Wynne, library, retired?" She leaned closer, squinting at the patch. "Your father helped install the first safety rig in that gym. I remember the photo, him standing by the ladder with that same patch on his sleeve." Eli looked down at it as if seeing it new. "He did a lot of odd jobs. He built half the rafters," Clara said. "People just forget who held the ladders." The doorbell jingled. Jamie Cole, the young volunteer from the gym, stepped in with a notebook tucked under his arm. "Hey, Mr. Harlan. Sorry, you mind if I sit? I'm collecting stories for the Veterans Week thing." Clara's eyes brightened. "Perfect timing, Jamie. Your teacher still makes you cite sources." Jamie grinned. "I do digital. Scan tag upload, no dust involved." Clara laughed softly. "Then you'll hate our basement." Eli stirred his coffee. "You folks ever think maybe not everything needs tagging?" Jamie tilted his head. "You've been here since before Wi-Fi." Eli's mouth twitched. "Since before passwords meant anything." Humor Light won. Delivered the counter crowd chuckled. A clock above the pie case ticked steady. Rain began to pattern the window. The diner's warmth hummed around them. Clara pulled a folded clipping from her purse. "Found this last year when we cleaned archives. Your dad signed the original maintenance log. We boxed it basement B2 shelf. You should see it." She tapped the photo Eli's father in coveralls beside a young principal, a brass plaque half visible behind them. He hesitated. "I wouldn't know what to do with it." "Just remember it's there," Clara said. "Some legacies stay quiet till someone opens the drawer." Jamie scribbled notes the way young people do when they sense something old but don't yet value it. "I can help you find it," he said. "School project and all." Eli drained his cup, left a quarter tip under the saucer. "Basement's cold this time of year." Clara smiled. "So is the truth till we bring it up." I rest marker. But the rain kept time with memory. Later, they walked the short block to the town library, rain misting through the streetlights. The building's bricks were the same color as the clay dust that used to cling to Eli's boots after Navy drills. Inside the door creaked a sound that belonged to places that never rushed. Clara led them past shelves labeled Local Records 1940 to 1990. She pointed to the stairwell. "Down there. Box marked Maintenance. Blue binder." Jamie brushed water from his notebook. "What do you think's in it?" Eli shrugged. "Maybe just old ink." Clara's reply was quiet, or maybe proof. They stood for a moment at the top of the stairs, listening to the hum of the building. Light from the street bled across the floor, touching the patch on Eli's sleeve faded. Thread still catching attention when it didn't ask for any. The rain had stopped, but the town smelled like damp paper and diesel when Jamie Cole biked up to the school shed. He carried a small cardboard box, water-spotted from the ride, its flaps tied with string. The evening light slid through thin clouds, silvering the gravel. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed above rows of paint cans and folded ladders. Eli Harlan knelt by the workbench, sorting bolts into jars. The smell of oil and sawdust clung to everything, even the quiet. Jamie lifted the box. "Look what we found in the library basement." Eli wiped his hands on a rag. "You actually went down there. Clara let me. Said it might be yours." They opened the lid. Inside lay an old log book, its pages browned at the edges, handwriting neat and slow T. Harlan Safety Reinforcement, East Beam, 1978. Beside the note was a pencil sketch of the gym supports. Jamie smiled. "Your dad even drew the layout." Eli touched the page lightly, a finger following the faint graphite lines. He had a steady hand. Navy trained him that way. Jamie tilted the book to the light. "Think the inspector will want to see it?" Eli's eyes narrowed. "Not yet." He closed the cover carefully, slid it into a drawer, and turned the key. "You're hiding it. I'm keeping it safe. Paper like that doesn't like daylight." Jamie looked puzzled, but didn't press. He left with a wave, the door closing softly behind him. Later that evening, Mason Keir stepped out of the main office and noticed the shed light still burning. Through the window, he saw Eli lock the drawer and switch off the lamp. To a man raised on forms and audits, it looked like concealment. By morning, the post office line hummed louder than the sorting machine. "He's keeping old reports," someone said. "Probably covering code violations," another added. An envelope fluttered from the stack as the gossip passed from one clerk to the next. The rumor folded itself neatly into town talk, stamped with assumption, sealed with certainty. At the far end, Clara Wynne waited with a book of stamps in hand. She caught fragments, Eli tampering board meeting. Her lips pressed thin. The clerk asked, "You still working at the library?" "Miss Clara, sometimes," she said, "when truth needs dusting." That afternoon, Eli returned to the gym. A memo from the city sat on his bench, red-stamped Inspection Board Emergency Review tomorrow, 9 a.m. He read it once, then folded it, slid it into his pocket. The paper felt heavier than it should. SM lock plus metaphor. He was pinned by paperwork, not people. The weight came from rules, not fists. Jamie rushed in breathless. "Mr. Harlan Mason's telling everyone you forged maintenance logs." Eli's voice stayed low. "Rumors have shorter legs than truth." "You're not going to say anything?" "No need. The truth knows how to wait its turn." Jamie frowned. "They'll think silence means guilt." Eli looked toward the rafters, hearing the creak of metal expanding in the late-day heat. Or patience. The gym lights flickered, once the kind of brief blackout that makes everyone pause. When they steadied again, Eli returned to polishing a wrench. Outside, the sky turned the color of faded brass. Clara stood at the library window across the street, already pulling a folder from her shelf. Imagery, fluorescent, hum, oil, smell, flutter of envelopes. Eye rest, marker still. He didn't defend himself. The hallway clock struck 6. He placed the wrench down, straightened his jacket, and looked once more at the closed drawer. The town library board met on the first Tuesday of every month. But that night the room was fuller than usual. Folding chairs scraped against the parquet floor as townsfolk gathered, raincoats steaming by the radiator. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, a tired rhythm that made everyone whisper softer than they meant to. Eli Harlan stood near the back wall, hat in his hands. His work jacket still smelled faintly of solvent and rain. Beside him, Jamie Cole held the cardboard box from the shed, its corners worn. At the head table, Mason Keir straightened a folder thick with typed reports. He spoke with the confidence of someone who had never had to scrub a floor himself. "Mr. Harlan's maintenance records," Mason said, tapping the papers, "are inconsistent. No digital entries, no photographic documentation. I have reason to believe he paused for effect that past repairs were never certified. A murmur rippled through the room. Eli raised his head slowly. Every beam that holds that roof is still the one we built. My signature just isn't typed. Mason's jaw set. So you admit you never followed updated protocol? Eli met his gaze. Protocol's a fine thing when it remembers people. The board members glanced at one another. Principal Hart, gray-haired and weary from 30 years of budget meetings, cleared his throat. Let's keep this civil, Mason continued, voice clipped. The matter isn't sentiment, it's safety. We can't rely on nostalgia. Jamie shifted uncomfortably, clutching the box tighter. The room's hum felt louder now, like the lights themselves were judging. The doors at the back opened. Clara Wynne entered, a gust of cooler air following her. She carried a flat wooden object wrapped in a cloth. Before you finish that sentence, Mr. Kears, she said, I'd like to submit an exhibit from the library archives. She laid the object on the table and peeled away the cloth. Dust floated upward in a slow shimmer. Beneath it lay a bronze plaque, its engraving dulled but clear enough to read, Dedicated 1978 Gymnasium Reinforcement Project. Lead Engineer Sergeant Thomas Harlan. For the safety of children unseen. The silence deepened. Someone drew in a breath. Jamie opened the box, pulled out the logbook, and set it beside the plaque. His hands trembled a little as he read aloud. Signed, Sergeant Thomas Harlan, for the safety of children unseen. He looked toward Eli. He built it, sir. You just kept it standing. Mason's expression flickered. He started to speak, but Clara's voice carried over him. Eli's been maintaining his father's work for 40 years without a single failure. That's more than compliant, Mr. Keir. That's a legacy. The fluorescent hum faded as if even the fixtures understood the moment. The old clock above the door stopped ticking mid-second. Eli exhaled, once the air trembling just enough to move the dust motes. For the first time that evening, his shoulders straightened, not in defiance, but in release. Semlock plus symbolic turn. He wasn't crushed by blame anymore, just pinned by protocol and freed by proof. Principal Hart rose from his chair. I believe that settles the question. He turned toward Mason. Sometimes the ledger doesn't know the whole story. Mason nodded stiffly. Maybe it should start learning. A rustle swept the crowd, half relief, half apology. Someone in the back began to clap, but Eli raised a hand. No need, he said quietly. The building's applause enough. Clara smiled through the hush. Jamie brushed dust from the plaque, revealing the last word unseen glinting beneath the lamp. Short's moment number 2 close-up on hands, wiping the plaque, the bronze shining under a single beam. Principal Hart motioned toward the table. We'll see this mounted again before Veterans Week. Eli only said, let it hang where the kids can touch it. They'll understand better than speeches. The crowd began to disperse in murmurs. Mason lingered as if waiting for an instruction that never came. Mr. Harlan, he said finally, for what it's worth, the place is solid. Eli nodded. Always was. As chairs folded and rain returned against the windows, the clock's hand clicked forward again. Time resumed lighter now. The old plaque lay center stage beneath the library lights, polished by evidence, not pride. I rest marker. Then the silence held honor enough. By evening, the rain had washed the town into quieter colors. Storefronts glowed in puddle reflections, and the sign outside Darlene's diner flickered just enough to feel human. Inside, the crowd hummed lower than usual. No sharp laughter. no gossip rising over the hiss of the grill. Something in the air had shifted. Behind the counter, Eli Harlan crouched under the sink, wrench in hand, the kind of work that still felt like prayer. The drip had been steady all week, one small leak mocking his precision. Now, it gave way to the patient rhythm of metal on pipe. The bell over the door jingled. Mason Keir stepped in, rain on his collar folder under his arm, but unopened. He paused, scanning the booths before spotting Eli at work. "You never rest, do you?" Mason said. Eli's voice came from under the counter. "Pipes don't wait for schedules." Mason pulled off his coat, sat on the nearest stool. "Guess you're right." For a long moment, only the tap of tools answered. Then Mason cleared his throat. "About the meeting?" Eli tightened the last fitting. "No need to finish that sentence." Mason tried a smile. "Guess I owe you a coffee." Darlene, always listening, even when pretending not to, refilled a mug and slid it across to Mason. "Make it 2, she said. "He drinks his black." Mason nodded, watching Eli straighten. "You know, I almost walked out of that meeting thinking I was right." Eli tested the faucet. A clean stream ran smooth. "Then you learned something valuable." Mason's grin faltered into sincerity. "Yeah. Learned that proof doesn't always come stamped." Eli wiped his hands. "Some proof just keeps holding weight." At the far booth, Clara Wynne and Jamie Cole watched through the mirror's reflection. Clara stirred her tea with quiet amusement. "You see, Jamie? That's what apology looks like when men are older than their pride." Jamie smiled. "I thought apologies came with speeches." "They used to," Clara said. "Now they come with coffee." A couple from the hardware store sat near the window, whispering softly. "That Harlan fellow," the man said, "kept this place safe all these years." "Didn't even take credit," his wife added. "Just fixed what needed fixing." The conversation rippled outward, not gossip this time, but gentle pride, a community relearning its manners. Community echo number 1, the sound of people adjusting their stories. Mason lifted his cup. "So how long you been patching this town together?" Eli shrugged. "Long enough to know it leaks again tomorrow." "That doesn't bother you?" He smiled faintly. "Gives me something to do after breakfast." Darlene leaned in, towel over one shoulder. "Well, Mr. Keir, looks like you're safe to eat off the floor again." "Good," Mason said, "since my foot's in my mouth already." The diner laughed, easy and neighborly. Humor light too. Darlene poured another refill. "Honor special today on the house." Eli looked at her, amused. "You naming drinks now, only the quiet ones," she said. The bell over the door rang again, letting in a cool breeze that carried the scent of rain and streetlight. Clara tapped her spoon once and stood. "Come on, Jamie. Let's let the men finish their peace talks." Jamie grabbed his jacket. "Think they'll be friends now?" Clara smiled. "They already are. They just won't use the word." Eli gathered his wrench and rags, packing them neatly into a toolbox that had more scratches than paint left. Mason watched, unsure whether to shake his hand or simply stay quiet. "Good work," Mason said finally. Eli nodded. "Same to you for listening." They didn't smile. They didn't need to. The faucet's steady drip had stopped, and that silence spoke loud enough. Outside, the rain began again, softer this time. Streetlights reflected gold across wet pavement, and the diner windows fogged with warmth. In their glassy surface, the faint outline of the plaque could be seen from across the street, waiting to be rehung before morning. Silent beat rain tapping the window. Eli's nod, the town breathing easier. I rest marker. Anyway, the town slept easier that night. The dawn came soft, washing the town in thin gold. The school gym sat still, its windows fogged with breath from the cold night before. Inside, the hum of the old lights returned steady like a heartbeat checking in. Eli Harlan stood by the east wall toolbox, open screws lined in a small tin lid. Beside him, Jamie Cole held the newly polished plaque, its brass letters catching each flicker of early sun. Dust motes floated between them, lazy and unbothered. "You sure you don't want help from the maintenance crew?" Jamie asked. Eli smiled. "If I waited for committees, nothing would ever hang straight." They lifted together, old and young. In rhythm, one steady hand guiding one curious hand, learning. The plaque met the wall with a muted click. Eli tightened the last screw, then stepped back to look. The engraving gleamed again, dedicated 1978, Gymnasium Reinforcement Project. Lead engineer Sergeant Thomas Harlan, for the safety of children unseen. Eli ran a thumb along the edge. He'd have liked this light, he murmured. Jamie leaned against the ladder. "Your dad?" Eli nodded. He built things to last longer than memory. Jamie hesitated. "Guess you did too." From his coat pocket, Eli pulled a folded note, its corners soft from time. He slid it carefully beneath the bottom edge of the glass frame. "Something to keep with it," he said. Jamie read the line aloud. "Honor doesn't need an audience." The words rested there, plain ink, quiet truth. Eli picked up his maintenance notebook and placed it in Jamie's hands. "Write new pages when I can't." Jamie looked down at it. "You're not leaving, are you?" Eli smiled faintly. "Not from here, just shifting posts." Outside, the sun had risen enough to stain the floorboards in amber. Through the windows, the first students crossed the yard, laughing, backpacks bouncing, not one of them knowing the story that now hung a few feet above eye level. Community Echo Number 2, legacy unseen but living. Jamie closed the notebook slowly. "You think they'll ever know what this means?" Eli watched the light dance across the plaque. "They don't need to. That's the point." He wiped his hands on the rag, unfolded it neatly, and placed it back in the toolbox. Every motion had the weight of routine turned sacred. From the open door, a soft voice called. Clara Wynne stood across the street on her porch swing, waving gently with a thermos in hand. Eli returned the wave, the kind shared by neighbors who no longer need words to explain a thing. Jamie pushed the gym door open wider. Sunlight spilled across the floor, brushing over the plaque, until the words glowed like something living. He turned back once, offering a small salute, not the military kind, but the kind teenagers make when they understand just enough to start asking better questions later. Shorts moment number 3. Close up the note under glass letters, steady against the light. Eli closed the door behind them. The sound echoed, once soft and final. Outside, the air smelled of rain, giving up to morning. I rest marker. Then the morning took over quietly. The gym was quiet again, the kind of quiet that carried through small towns at dawn, the smell of waxed floors and distant coffee, drifting from the diner across the street. Eli checked the last bolt, the wrench cool in his hand, and nodded toward Jamie, who watched the plaque gleam under the pale light. Clara waved from her porch swing, and the boy waved back the movement, slow, respectful, like passing a torch without ceremony. Some truths, Eli thought, don't shout. They just hold. Kindness without reason is a lamp left burning in winter, steady unnoticed, but there when someone needs direction. Down the hall, footsteps echoed, students arriving unaware of the proof waiting on the wall. The note beneath the glass caught a blade of sunlight, and the words shimmered as though newly written honor doesn't need an audience.